Mark Turner woke up to the sound of soft rain tapping against the kitchen window. The morning light slipped through the curtains, painting pale gold lines across the counter. He moved through the kitchen in the same quiet rhythm he'd followed for years. Coffee first, toast next. A glance at the clock, then the day would begin. His life was calm, predictable, maybe even too predictable. 12 years of marriage had turned passion into routine. And though there was still affection, something inside him often wondered where the spark had gone. Emily. His wife had always been the gentle soul in their marriage. Kind, the one who remembered birthdays, family calls, and small anniversaries Mark usually forgot. Lately, though, she had been distant. Not cold, just quieter. She smiled less, talked less, and seemed lost in thoughts she didn't share. Mark noticed it, but every time he tried to ask, she brushed it off with a quick, "I'm fine." So he stopped asking. That morning, as he reached for his mug, he saw something that broke the rhythm of his usual day, a small cream-colored envelope resting against the coffee pot. His name was written on it in Emily's familiar cursive. Mark, no other words. His eyebrows drew together. Emily wasn't the type to leave notes. He picked it up, feeling an odd rush of nerves, and carefully opened it. Inside was a small folded card. The message was short, only one line. "For the man who still makes my heart race." Mark blinked at the words, unsure what to make of them. Beneath the note was another slip of paper, this one neatly typed, saying, "Pack a bag. We're going somewhere this weekend. Just us." For a moment, he simply stared. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It had been years since Emily had done something spontaneous. Their lives had become all work and errands and quiet evenings. This, whatever it was, felt different. It felt like her old self again, the Emily who used to surprise him with late-night road trips and stargazing drives. When Emily walked into the kitchen, a few minutes later, her hair still damp from the shower, she saw the open envelope in his hand. Her lips curved into a soft, nervous smile. "So, you found it." "I did," he said, his tone half curious, half amused. "What's this about? Are we running away from something?" "Maybe from routine," she said quietly, pouring herself coffee. "You'll see, Mark. Just trust me. It's been too long since it was just us." Mark searched her face, trying to read her eyes. There was something behind her calm expressions, something tender, almost fragile. But before he could ask, she changed the subject, asking about his work, his upcoming deadlines. Anything to steer the talk elsewhere. He didn't push. Maybe it was better to let her lead this time. That evening, as he packed his duffel bag, Mark's mind drifted back to the early years, their honeymoon in a cabin by a lake. The laughter that came easily. The nights spent talking about dreams and silly plans. Somewhere along the way, life had gotten heavier. Bills, deadlines, worries, they had replaced those soft, easy moments. He realized he missed that version of them, the one that existed before the world demanded so much. The next morning, Emily loaded the car before he even came downstairs. She wore a simple white sweater, her hair tied back, a glow of quiet excitement in her face. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "Where are we going?" She smiled mysteriously. "North." They drove through the rainy streets of Seattle, passing rows of tall pines and misty hills. Music played softly, old songs they used to listen to when they were dating. Mark glanced at her occasionally, noticing how peaceful she looked staring out the window. Every now and then she would hum along with the radio, her fingers tapping against the dashboard. It felt new again. Hours passed and they crossed into Canada. Emily finally spoke. "Do you remember Whistler?" Mark smiled faintly. "Our honeymoon spot." She nodded. "We're going back." The words hit him with a mix of surprise and warmth. He hadn't been there in years. Life had moved too fast. The idea of returning felt almost symbolic, like stepping back in time to where everything began. As the car climbed the mountain roads, landscape grew more breathtaking. Snow dusted the treetops, and lakes reflected the pale light of the cloudy sky. It was quiet between them, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that held unspoken emotions. They arrived at a small wooden cabin tucked among the trees. It looked almost identical to the one they'd stayed in years ago. Emily unlocked the door and stepped inside first, inhaling deeply. "Smells like cedar and memories," she said softly. Mark laughed. "You remembered the same line you said back then?" She turned, smiling faintly. "Some things don't fade." Inside, everything was warm and simple: fireplace, old wooden furniture, a big window facing the lake. Emily unpacked a basket she'd brought from home: fresh bread, favorite coffee beans, a small framed photo of their wedding day. She set it all neatly on the counter. Like she had planned every detail, Mark watched her, a strange mix of admiration and curiosity stirring inside him. "You really thought this through?" he said. She looked up, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "I wanted to." Then, after a pause, "We needed this, Mark." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think we did." That evening, they sat by the fire with mugs of coffee. The flames flickered across her face, highlighting the faint lines near her eyes, the kind that came from both laughter and years. Mark studied her quietly, realizing how much he had missed truly seeing her. Emily broke the silence. "Do you ever think about how different we are now?" Mark hesitated. "Yeah, I do." She sipped her drink. "Sometimes I miss who we used to be." "Me too," he said quietly. "But maybe we can find them again." Emily looked at him, then really looked tan for a moment. The world slowed down. There was no noise, no distance, just two people who had once promised forever, trying to find their way back to it. Later that night, as Mark stared into the fire, he caught Emily watching him. She smiled softly, and for the first time in years he felt that same spark that had drawn him to her all those years ago. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was gentle. Like the feeling of coming home after a long journey. Outside, the rain stopped, and the cabin filled with the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Inside, silence spoke louder than words. Mark didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but something inside him told him that this trip wasn't just about memories, it was about rediscovering love before it was too late. And when he finally closed his eyes that night, he didn't feel tired. He felt alive again, like a man being given a second chance to hold on to something he thought time had quietly taken away. The morning light slipped through the cabin curtains, painting soft lines on the wooden floor. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that made Mark forget about emails, traffic, and deadlines. When he stepped outside, the air was cold and clean, smelling of pine and rain. Emily was already awake, sitting on the porch steps with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked peaceful, wrapped in a blanket, watching the mist rise off the lake. He sat beside her, hands in his pockets. "You've been up long." "A while," she said with a faint smile. "I couldn't sleep. I just wanted to hear the silence again." Mark looked out at the still water, where their reflections shimmered side by side. For the first time in years, he noticed the small details: the way her hair caught the light, the way her shoulders relaxed when she breathed in the mountain air. He realized how long it had been since they had shared a morning without rushing somewhere after breakfast. They decided to walk down the trail behind the cabin. The path was muddy from last night's rain, and the trees formed a green tunnel overhead. Birds darted between branches, and the ground was covered with wet leaves. Emily walked ahead, her boots leaving small prints behind. Mark followed, trying to match her pace. He noticed she kept glancing back at him, as if checking that he was still there. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just trying to remember this place. We came here once, but it feels like a lifetime ago." He smiled softly. 12 years ago, we got lost on this trail." Emily laughed quietly. "You swore you knew the way." "I did," he said, grinning, "until I didn't." The memory made them both laugh, and for a brief moment, it felt like old times. The laughter faded, replaced by an easy silence. They reached a small clearing where the trees opened to a lake view. Emily stopped, looking out over the water. Her face softened. "This is where we took our honeymoon photo," she said. "Remember? You dropped the camera in the lake right after." Mark chuckled. "I remember the panic." She smiled faintly, but then her eyes grew thoughtful. We were so sure back then. Everything felt possible. I miss that version of us. Mark's smile faded. Yeah, he said quietly. I miss them too. They stood there for a moment, both staring at the reflection of the sky on the lake. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy with things left unsaid. Later that afternoon, they returned to the cabin. Emily cooked while Mark chopped wood for the fire. It was simple, ordinary work, but somehow it felt meaningful. They weren't talking much. But there was comfort in the quiet rhythm of doing things together again. When the fire finally burned steady and bright, they sat down with dinner, homemade soup, bread, and coffee. The smell filled the room. Emily set 2 candles on the table, smiling shyly. For old times, she said. Mark smiled back. Feels like we're dating again? Maybe we should have never stopped, she said softly. He hesitated, staring into his coffee. Yeah, he admitted. I guess life just got in the way. Used to tell myself that too, she said, her voice low. But I think we stopped trying. We stopped talking, stopped holding each other when things got hard. We became 2 people living side by side instead of together. Her words hit him harder than he expected. Mark had thought about those things before, but never said them out loud. He looked at her, guilt and love mixing in his chest. You're right, he said. I should have tried harder. I thought if I just worked more, earned more, it would make you happy. I never wanted more, she whispered. I just wanted you. The words were simple, but they sank deep. For a long time, Mark said nothing. The fire crackled softly, and the sound of wind brushed against the windows. He reached across the table, his hand finding hers. Then let's fix it, he said quietly. Let's start again. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. You really think we can? He nodded. I don't know how, but yeah, I want to try. They sat there holding hands. To people trying to remember what love once felt like, both realizing it had never truly disappeared, had just been buried under years of noise and distance. Later, they went outside. The sky had cleared and stars scattered across the dark blue. Emily leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. The air was cold, but neither of them moved. I forgot how beautiful this place was, she said softly. Mark nodded. You used to say it looked like a dream. Still does, she said. But it feels different now. Maybe because we're different. He looked down at her, the soft glow of moonlight brushing her face. Different doesn't have to mean worse, he said. Emily smiled faintly. Maybe not. They stayed like that for a long time, just breathing, letting the quiet fill what words couldn't. Something small and fragile began to grow again between them, not the wild passion of their youth, but something steadier, something real. When they went back inside, the fire had burned low. Emily pulled out an old photo album she had brought from home. I found this in the attic last week, she said. Thought we could look through it. They sat side by side on the couch, flipping through the pages. There were pictures of their wedding, their first apartment, old road trips. Mark laughed at the younger versions of themselves, messy hair, wide smiles, no worries in their eyes. Then they came across a picture from their honeymoon, the same lake, the same spot they had stood that morning. Emily's hair was wild in the wind, and Mark's arm was wrapped around her shoulders. They both looked fearless, happy, alive. Emily traced the photo with her finger. I want to find those people again, she whispered. Mark looked at her. They're still here, he said softly. They just forgot how to look at each other. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Emily leaned her head on his shoulder again, and he wrapped an arm around her, holding her like he hadn't in years. The fire flickered low, throwing soft light across the room. Outside, the wind howled gently through the trees. Inside, it felt like time had paused to souls quietly remembering how to love again. And as the night deepened, Mark realized something. The real journey wasn't the road that brought them to the cabinet. It's the one that brought them back to each other. For the first time in years, he didn't feel lost. He felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. He looked down at Emily, asleep against his shoulder, and whispered to himself, "We're getting there." Outside, the stars shimmered like promises waiting to be kept. The morning sun slid through the cabin windows, spilling gold across the floorboards. Mark stretched, expecting to feel Emily beside him, but her side of the bed was cold. At first, he smiled, thinking she'd gone to make coffee. The smell of pine and smoke drifted in from outside. But when he called her name, the silence that answered felt too heavy. He got up, pulling on his sweater. The cabin felt different too, still. Then he saw it, resting on her pillow, a folded letter with his name written on the front. His heart tightened. He sat down and opened it carefully. The first line made his chest go hollow. "If you're reading this, it means I had to go for a little while. Don't panic, okay? I just needed you to remember how it feels to miss me, before it's too late." Mark read it again and again, his hands trembling slightly. What did she mean? Where did she go? The words "before it's too late" echoed in his mind like an alarm. He rushed outside, scanning the quiet forest. Her car was gone. Only her scarf remained on the porch railing, fluttering in the wind. For a moment, Mark just stood there, trying to make sense of it. The last few days had felt like a healing moment, like something was being repaired between them. Now, suddenly, she was gone again. He called her phone, no answer. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. Panic started to creep in. He ran his hand through his hair and whispered to himself, "What are you doing, Emily?" He drove into the small town nearby, checking the little cafe where they'd stopped the day before. No sign of her. The woman behind the counter recognized him and said, "Your wife came by early this morning. She got a coffee to go. Said she needed some time to think." Mark nodded weakly, thanked her, and stepped back into the cold air. Time to think. The words cut deep. What was she thinking about? Them, their marriage. The way she looked at him last night had been soft, hopeful. He couldn't understand why she'd leave now. He drove around for hours, checking the roads, the lake, the trails they'd walked yesterday. Every turn felt like a memory. Every empty road made him feel the weight of her absence. By afternoon, he parked by the lake where they'd laughed just the day before. The water shimmered under the gray sky, calm and endless. He sat on a rock by the shore, running his hands through the cold sand, feeling helpless. The note echoed in his head again. "I needed you to remember how it feels to miss me." He realized then that this wasn't about running a wheat, was about reminding him of something. About the ache of losing what he had taken for granted. For years, he had assumed Emily would always be there, smiling, forgiving, waiting. But now he felt what it was like to not have her close. And it hurt. As the day faded into dusk, Mark drove back to the cabin. The sky turned deep blue, and fog rolled through the trees. He sat by the fire, staring into the flames, thinking of every time he had failed to say, "I love you." Every time he'd chosen work over a quiet dinner with her, he didn't realize how long he'd been sitting there until headlights flashed through the window. The crunch of tires on gravel made him jump to his feet. The door opened quietly, and Emily stepped inside. She looked tired, her hair damp from the mist. But there was a calmness in her face that unsettled him. "Emily," he said, his voice cracking, "where did you go? I've been looking everywhere for you." She closed the door gently, set down her bag, and met his eyes. "I went for a drive," she said softly. "I needed to be alone for a few hours, without telling me." His voice carried hurt more than anger. She walked closer, her steps slow. "Mark, I left you that note because I needed you to feel what I've felt for years." He stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "You stopped seeing me, Mark. You were here, but you weren't with me. You were working, distracted, tired. I missed you even when we were in the same room. I just needed you to understand that feeling." Her words hit him hard. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she continued. "I just needed to see if you'd still come after me." Mark stepped closer, his chest tight. "Of course I would. I'd never stop." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. Then that's my answer. What answer? That you still care, she whispered. That we still have something worth saving. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. You've scared me, Emily. I know, she said softly, and I'm sorry. But I needed to remind both of us that love doesn't survive on comfort alone. It survives when we choose to fight for it. Mark felt tears burn his eyes. He hadn't cried in years, not since his father's funeral, but now he couldn't stop the emotion from rising. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. Emily brushed her thumb across his cheek. Then don't. Just don't let life take over again. Promise me we'll keep choosing each other. He nodded, his voice breaking. I promise. They stood there, the firelight flickering over their faces, shadows dancing against the wooden walls. The air between them was thick with unspoken feelings, regret, relief, love that had nearly been lost but wasn't gone yet. After a while, she sat beside him on the couch. There's something else, she said softly. Mark turned to her, heart still pounding. What is it? She hesitated, looking at the flames. There's one more part to your gift. But not yet. You'll understand soon. Emily, he said, trying to read her tone. What are you talking about? She gave him a small, mysterious smile. Patience, Mark. Just one more surprise. He tried to press her for answers, but she leaned her head on his shoulder, ending the conversation with silence. Her hand found his fingers intertwining naturally, like they used to. Mark stared into the fire, still shaken, but a calm warmth began to spread through him. Whatever her surprise was, he didn't care right now. She was here, beside him, alive and real. That was enough. Outside, the night grew colder, the forest alive with faint sounds of wind and distant water. Inside, the cabin glowed with soft light, wrapping them in quiet peace. Morning came softly, with the light of dawn spilling across the lake. Mark woke before Emily, the cabin quiet except for the faint creak of wood and the gentle wind outside. He watched her sleeping beside him, her face peaceful, her breathing calm. For the first time in years, he felt completely present. No rushing thoughts, no plans for work, no lists in his head. Just her and the quiet rhythm of life returning to something real. When Emily opened her eyes, she smiled at him. You're up early, she whispered. Couldn't sleep, Mark said. Didn't want to waste a second of this. She laughed softly, stretching under the blanket. You sound different, she said. Maybe I am, he replied. And he meant it. The last few days had changed something in him. He had been reminded of what truly mattered: connection, attention, the little things that made love stay alive. After breakfast, Emily told him she wanted to show him something. Get dressed, she said with a small, secretive smile. We're going outside. They walked down a narrow path behind the cabin, one that led to a small wooden dock by the lake. The water shimmered under the morning light, the mountains standing tall and still in the distance. Emily stood at the edge of the dock, her hands tucked in her coat pockets. Mark looked around, puzzled. So what's this surprise? She turned to him, eyes bright but nervous. Before I tell you, promise me something. He nodded. Anything? Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll hold on to this moment. Because this is the day everything changes. Mark felt his heart tighten. Emily, you're scaring me a little, he said. Half smiling, she reached into her coat pocket and handed him a small wrapped box. It was simple, tied with a piece of silver ribbon. He turned it in his hands, confused. What is this? Just open it, she said quietly. He tore the paper slowly, revealing a small black velvet box. Inside was a folded piece of paper. He opened a tanned froze. It wasn't paper. It was a sonogram photo. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The sound of water, the wind, the distant birds all faded. Mark's eyes widened as he stared at the blurry little image in his hands. Emily, is this? She nodded, tears already filling her eyes. Yes, Mark, you're going to be a dad. He couldn't speak. His throat closed up, his chest tight with emotion. A flood of memories and feelings hit him all at once. Every fight, every silent dinner, every missed moment, and now this. a new beginning, a second chance not just for them, but for something bigger. He stepped forward, pulling her into his arms. Neither said a word for a long time. He held her close, his heart pounding with disbelief and joy. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "You're serious? Where really?" "Yes," she said through tears. "I found out a few weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I wanted to find us again before I shared it. I didn't want this news to feel like a fix. I wanted it to feel like hope." Mark's eyes filled with tears. He cupped her face in his hands, his voice breaking. "Emily, this is the greatest gift you could have ever given me." She smiled softly. "I thought maybe you'd say that." He laughed through his tears. "Every man dreams of this," he said. "A second chance. A family. You've given me both." They stood there for a long while, the morning sun warming their faces, the water around them glittering like glass. Emily leaned against him, whispering, "I was so afraid to tell you. I didn't know how you'd react after everything." Mark shook his head. "I don't care about anything from before. All I care about is this moment. You, us, our child." Her eyes softened. "Then maybe that's what this trip was all about," she said. "Finding our way back to what matters." Later that afternoon, they sat by the fireplace again. Mark held the sonogram in his hands, staring at it like it was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think the best moments in life were big things, new jobs, houses, plans. But it's this. It's sitting here with you, knowing we're starting something new." Emily smiled. "That's all I wanted you to remember." He looked at her. "How far along are you?" "Almost 3 months," she said. "I wanted to make sure everything was okay before telling you." Mark brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I can't believe it. We're going to be parents. We're going to be an amazing dad," she said. He chuckled softly. "Only because you'll be an amazing mom." The fire crackled beside them, and for a long while they said nothing. It was a comfortable silence, filled with peace and understanding. They had both been through so much distance, doubt, quiet pain, but somehow they'd found their way back to each other. When night came, they stepped outside once more. The stars above were bright and endless. Emily took his hand, resting it gently on her stomach. "This is our fresh start," she whispered. Mark felt tears rise again. But this time they were different tears of gratitude, of wonder. "You've given me everything I didn't know I was missing," he said. Emily smiled softly. "Then maybe you'll never forget again." "I won't," he promised. They stood in silence, looking up at the stars, feeling the stillness of the world around them. It was as if time had slowed down just for them, allowing them to breathe, to exist in this one perfect moment. Back inside. Mark placed the sonogram on the mantel above the fireplace. "That's going right there," he said, "so we never forget what this means." Emily nodded, her hand resting over his. "You know," she said with a laugh, "I was nervous you'd faint or something when you saw it." He smiled. "I almost did." They both laughed softly, the sound warm and easy. It was the kind of laughter they hadn't shared in years, the kind that came from love that had survived too much to ever fade again. As the fire burned low, Mark turned to her. "You know what I realized?" "What?" she asked. "That the gift every man dreams of isn't something you can buy. It's what you gave me a chance to start over, to love better, to become someone worthy of this." Emily's eyes filled again. "You already are." He kissed her forehead, pulling her close. "Then let's promise each other something," he said. "No matter how crazy life gets, we don't forget this moment. Deal?" she whispered. Outside, snow began to fall softly over the lake, the world turning quiet and silver. Inside, 2 people sat by a dying fire, holding on to the warmth of love that had been broken and rebuilt stronger than before. And as Mark drifted to sleep beside her, his last thought was of the small heartbeat growing inside the woman he loved. A new life, a new beginning. Emily's gift had not been wrapped in paper or sealed with a bow, had been made of forgiveness, hope, and a promise for tomorrow. And in that moment, Mark knew The greatest gift every man dreams of isn't power or success or even freedom. It's a second chance at love and the family born from it.